Welcome to the Trailblazing Texas podcast, where we embark on a journey through our diverse Texas landscapes and breathtaking trails while always engaging with our amazing Texas hiking community. So settle in, tighten up those bootlaces, and get ready for the thrilling tales awaiting for you on this episode.
Yeah, see the Front Range. I can, I'm up here in Fort Collins, so I got a good view of Longs. So that's automatically a kind of a favorite. But no, even the one I did yesterday, this Red Peak it's in the Gore Range, and that range has just a really incredible view all the way around. A lot of these high peaks in Colorado, chances are you're going to be looking down on some awesome peaks. Some of the ones in Indian Peaks Wilderness are incredible views, but man, it'd be hard to nail it to any one specific mountain or something.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I even, as flat and unattractive as Denver is, I still just walk out the airport and go, "Oh my God, look, there's mountains."
Yeah, they're just right there. Yeah, and that's what's funny too is we're kind of cut in half. We got all the mountains and awesome stuff to the west, but then to all the plains to the east, and there's even some kind of cool stuff out there. There's a place called Pawnee Buttes that are these huge buttes that are out in the grasslands. Down kind of closer to Denver, there's kind of a more interesting geological place called I think it's called the Painted Mines. I haven't been there, but it kind of looks cool in pictures. So there's some stuff even for people to do that they don't want to get up into the elevation. The Great Sand Dunes, further down in Colorado. I don't know why, but I actually haven't really had a chance to visit them yet, but they're super pretty. There's some awesome mountains around there. So the Sand Grazer down there, and yeah, there's lots to see just besides the high peaks too.
So in all your experience, do you have any spots that you found kind of like hidden gems where they're kind of like off the beaten path, or you can kind of pretty much guarantee that you're not going to see anybody there? It's kind of like your spot.
So the bad part about Colorado is a lot of
us Texans
people.
Yeah.
You can. I mean, I definitely find some good peaks and stuff. There's some around Breckenridge that I've found where you're not going to see very many people, if anybody. Mount Guyot, it's spelled Guyot. I think I'm pronouncing that right. That's a really cool one. That's a 13er down there that I don't think gets a whole lot of people. Again, with the numbers of the 12s or 13s, some of those you can get away from people. 14ers, forget about it. You're going to be up there with 35 of your closest friends. That's just, we can kind of get into more of the 14er experience here in a minute. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on them, but yeah, it's just, you can kind of get into some different nooks and crannies too. There was a mountain that we did in the park called Little Matterhorn that was really cool. It ends up getting into some really, really, really exposed third class, but still it's nothing technically difficult. But yeah, you're not going to see anybody up on something like that. But the big thing is mileage. Once you start pushing, 6-8 miles out or like backpacking, then you can get away from the people. But if you're within the first couple miles of a trailhead, though, you're going to have lots of friends. So,
I have a lot to say about y'all's trailheads, and
yeah, I'll bet. Yeah. What was your experience on some of the 14ers? Because I just did one last Monday, and it kind of reminded me of some stuff that I don't particularly care for on some of it. So
the biggest shock for me is, and thank goodness I'm an early person. If you're doing a 14er, and so I've done Elbert, Grays, Torreys, Quandary, and then there's one other one I don't. And if you're not at the trailhead by midnight, don't even bother.
Yeah.
And and I'm not exaggerating.
Right.
And the reason why, to the listeners that haven't hiked in Colorado, is there is a huge chance that if you're not off the mountain by noon, you're going to hit a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
And so everybody starts early, and the parking is about as limited as a $2 bill in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
it is. And also, what was overwhelming is doing the research to hike. And then, they're like, okay, you can park here, but then there's another, it's a 3-mile hike to the trailhead, but you could park there, but you need a 4-wheel drive. And then, like, okay, for me, like, okay, does that mean I need this big jacked up truck? Would my
Mhm.
Subaru get there, or the car that we rented? And then then like Gray's Tory, you can't park on the road, but you can because everybody was doing it, so it's just like, it's overwhelming to try to plan, and if you don't know, and you turn off the highway to do, let's say, Gray's or Tory, and you see cars already off the highway, and it's just miles of cars parking up to the trailhead, that's way overwhelming. We got there, I think, at 3 in the morning, and
Yep.
people were already parking on the side of the road. There was no, at the trailhead, there was no parking, and luckily, we were able to get pretty close. But yeah, it's just an overwhelming experience. I think for me, and also to the listeners, I was going to mention it down in the episode, that to experience Colorado, it's more than 14ers. You can
Absolutely.
do a 13er, you can do a 12-teener. you
Yeah.
can
Yep.
you can experience some amazing hikes, and you don't have to do the 14er, because like you said,
Absolutely.
there's not going to be a day where, well, maybe in the winter, but there's not going to be a
Yes.
day like in the spring, summer, or fall where you're not fighting 100 people, and and it almost makes it a miserable experience.
It can, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, if you're wanting that solitude and that quiet and just kind of that connection with nature or whatever, it's
It's not a
probably not going to be
14er.
found on a 14er. No. Um, but if you're out there just to like challenge yourself and because that's what you want to do, yeah, they're great. And the views.
But honestly, once I hit 13,000 feet, it doesn't matter if it's 13 or 14. I feel the same. I still can't breathe. I
Right.
still have to take breaks.
Yep.
So I don't.
No, and that's the thing. A lot of people do it for the gram. It's kind of like what we talk about. And and some people I know that they're really militant with lists. That's their thing, is to do all the 14ers, and that's fine. If
Yeah,
that's their goal, that's their deal. But yeah, for me personally, I rather forego several feet of elevation for solitude. For example, like Mount Meeker, it's 13.9 and change, and it gets a fraction of the travel that its neighboring peak Longs has.
mm-hmm.
On a busy day for Longs. So when we did Longs a couple years ago, we parked at 2:30 in the morning at the trailhead, and we were 4/10 of a mile from the trailhead. So, I mean, that gives you an idea of how many cars were down the road. We got lucky. I was doing it with a really strong partner. He's a firefighter and stays in great shape. And him and I made really good time up, and we just did the keyhole route. And a little bit of information on that route is it's a real kind of straightforward route until you get to the keyhole. And a lot of people will stay there and wait for the light to come up, because it gets a lot more technical and stuff. The route's a third class route, but none of that is on or before the keyhole. But everybody was kind of there hanging out, waiting for sunrise. And my buddy who I was with had done it before, and we're like, this is kind of gamble. We'll go on through in the dark. And man, luckily that paid off because we left a lot of the traffic. But man, there was still probably, I don't know, 15, 20 people on summit. It's a huge summit, so it was fine. But sometimes you get up there, like even last week, there was probably 25 people up on summit with us. And, it's just a different experience for sure versus something like I had yesterday where it was just me and my friend, on this 13er. So.
And to the Texas listeners, if you are going to Colorado and in your trail research, because I hope you're researching what you're about to be hiking, and there's the word keyhole, don't hike that. Just turn around, because that means that there's probably some sketchy stuff
beyond it.
The hike.
Well, I would encourage anybody that's going to come out and do a 14er, especially, and probably a lot of it is because of my, relative to where we're at, being in close proximity to it. I hear a lot of people will be like, "Oh, Longs Peak was my first 14er, so it should be yours too." They'll recommend it. Yeah, they'll recommend Longs as a 14er, and this is a mountain that usually
kills people.
Usually at least one a year. We've already had one this year. The year that I climbed it, there was a guy that was a fatality the following week, I believe. Yeah, it's a serious mountain.
That should not be your first attempt at a 14er.
Yep. Same thing with one of the first mountains that scared me was Mount Snuffles. And the reason it scared me is because of the people ahead of us that was their first 14er, and they were dislodging a bunch of rocks that was coming down the gully at us.
Yeah.
And again, they're like, "Oh, well, sorry, it's our first 14er," and I ran across the guy last week on Huron Peak. That was his first hike ever. His buddies decided to bring him up to, he was from Ohio, I think.
Yeah.
And he was not looking good. That's one of the things I noticed last time with it was, there was several people that I saw like sitting down or laying over basically just off the trail that did not look good. And like these people this last weekend, it's like, "Hey, how's it going?" "Oh, okay." It's like, "Everything all right?" "Oh yeah, we're just getting some food." I always check on them because, I'm not trying to helicopter them, but at the same time, I just see these people and you're like, okay, are they just overexertion or are they really struggling with altitude? Because, that does get people.
It gets, a lot of people. Luckily for me, it doesn't bother me. Okay. It bothers me because I can't breathe, but like headaches and just kind of the norm. Yeah. It's less oxygen.
Right.
I'm at sea level. So it gets me that way. But as like health wise, I'm fine. I just keep walking.
Yeah. And it's such a weird thing to see how elevation affects people differently. I mean, obviously if you're in better shape, you're probably going to have a better go of it than somebody that's in poor shape. But having said that, just because you're in good shape doesn't mean you're going to play well with elevation. Cause I've seen that before where somebody is very fit and they go up and all of a sudden they're having headaches and getting nauseous. Well, it's time for you to go down,
Yeah.
And I've seen it firsthand. I have a buddy that I've been on lots of 13ers with him, at least one 14er, and usually he's fine. But every once in a while, I've seen firsthand where we were on a 13er one time, and I think it's like 13.8, so it's pretty high. And he was fine to climb up and everything, but as we were starting to leave the summit, he just didn't look right. And it's like, "Hey man, you doing okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I just feeling like," he was like dozing off. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, that's in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we need to get down fast, And so I, even more than normal, was talking his ear off, but then asking him questions, even if it was dumb stuff, just making sure that he was still,
cognizant.
And making sense. And luckily he was fine, but yeah, I mean, it was kind of strange. It was almost like kind of a light switch. Once we got probably down under 13, about 12.7, 12.8, he was almost completely normal, but I've seen that twice now, where he's just had a day
Yeah,
where it just doesn't play well with the elevation.
that's crazy. So, what has been your most challenging hike that you've completed in Colorado?
So, like I was talking earlier, in the back of the Glacier Gorge, so it would be just kind of southwest of Long's Peak, is a 13er called Pagoda Mountain, and it was probably one of my more challenging ones. It's not overly long or overly high. But what makes it kind of tricky is once you get back into there, you get to the base of it, and you end up climbing kind of this gully slash slabby area, and it's high. It's kind of a class 2 plus or third class kind of stuff, but you gain about 15 or 1600 vertical feet in 4/10 of a mile.
Oh,
So yeah, so it's just, and it's a lot of it's loose, crumbly, crap. And you're just kind of on this vertical treadmill, and you're kind of watching for, rock fall on coming down. And yeah, it's just really, really, really slow going. And so like that one, or one just to the west of it, Chiefs Head's Peak. And it was just kind of a long day, something like 16 miles and like almost 6,000 vertical feet total. And it just kind of makes for some long days.
yeah.
But
So, what what percentage of the hikes that you do now that you've had to abandon, and what tends to be, hiking in Colorado, what do you think is the majority of these cases where you abandon a hike? Like, what's the reason?
weather.
Weather?
Yeah. So I haven't had to bail on very many.
Yeah.
Um, but usually I would say 9 times out of 10, it's going to be weather. And then there's been a couple times, I mean, the Spicy Moose was one. But then otherwise, I did have one time where we had to turn back because one of the guys in our group was really struggling with the elevation and conditions. Um, it was in winter time, and again, kind of going back to it, I do a lot of research, before we go, but it just turned out to be windier and colder than what we had expected. And I think we were only maybe 300 vertical feet from the summit, but with how slow that we were going, it was going to take a while. And once you see one of the guys like trying to sit down or lay down when you're climbing, you're like, no, this is not good. So that was one of the cases when we had to bail. But a lot of times, just those thunderstorms. I mean, you hit it perfectly earlier. Is anytime you're going to be above tree line, especially, you really want to be down before any potential thunderstorms. I usually give myself a couple hour buffer. So, for example, like if I'm looking at a particular peak and it's showing that I got a 40 or 50% chance of thunderstorms at like 2:00, I'm wanting to be back down below tree line, if not further down by 11, because I have had it where I'm at a summit and it's like 9 a.m. I wasn't expecting the weather till 11 or 12, and it's already there. And
So when you
I go ahead.
when you come out of tree line, are you checking the clouds and off in the
Always.
distance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for that. And it's a little tricky because in the morning, like we experienced this even just a few weeks ago. A lot of times you'll have kind of that morning cloud cover that'll usually kind of burn off by 9, 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
But more so what you're worried about is when you start seeing those really dark clouds start to kind of collect and stuff, and they can do it pretty fast sometimes. You'll be up there and look over and you'll start to see a few of them, and the next thing you know, they're starting to really kind of accumulate and build on each other. And I've had a few friends. I haven't experienced this firsthand, thank God, and I don't ever want to, but I've had a few friends where their poles or their axe is, vibrating or whatever because of the static electricity. And yeah,
Jeez.
that's just thinking about that, your ice axe or whatever buzzing because you're up there and that lightning's building. I don't
So
want any part of that.
let's say you're on a peak and you get caught in a lightning thunderstorm, or you see it rolling in. Outside of getting down, what are you supposed to do? Like it's
That's
too late and crawl
that
under some
that's
rock.
that's the thing is it no, I mean, even, in some of the classes I've taken, like in wilderness first aid, people be like, oh, if there's a cave, no, you don't, you're not even really safe inside that. And
Yeah,
so, no, the name of the game is not allowing yourself to be up into that, to where you're going to be in that situation. But yeah, just getting down below tree line. And a lot of times when I'm doing my route research and stuff, I'll look for bailout points or stuff that I can retreat down to. And I'll
yeah,
be like, okay, for example, like yesterday, we had, once we were up at a tree line, we had, I think it was a little over a mile and about 12 or 1300 vertical feet. So I'll look at that and kind of gauge on how long I think it'll take to get up or down that. And then I'll kind of factor that in. So always knowing like, okay, if something rolls in, I have an hour where I'm going to be
yeah.
exposed, and you just got to be mindful of that time.
So this is going to be a two-part question, one for you and one for us Texas hikers. What is the best time of year for hiking in Colorado for you? What do you enjoy most and why? And then for someone that's in Texas or in Oklahoma and they want to come visit Colorado, what time of year would you recommend? And also like from, the views aspects, and safety.
Yeah. So
Mm.
if you're trying to do something high, it seems like the best time is about mid August to the first week of September or second week of September, kind of in that group. I mean, when you start getting very far into September, obviously you got to start kind of worrying about the first snow.
Hmm.
But yeah, that it seems like kind of a sweet spot about middle of August, maybe first week of August, just kind of that month or 6 weeks in there where it seems to be that there's no snow crossings or less likely.
So I screwed up.
Yeah. And then it seems like the winds aren't as bad and some of the thunderstorms aren't as bad. I mean, obviously nothing's ever guaranteed,
Right.
but for me, it seems like that sweet spot's that kind of time. Probably my favorite time in Colorado, though, it would be first or second week of July.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because, yeah, you might encounter a little bit of snow here and there, but man, the wildflowers are starting to pop. It's everything's so green. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Like even, into the first week or so or two of August, it's still really green and it's really pretty. The
It,
runoff is really well.
yeah. What's crazy is I was on Quandary, and Quandary's just you get above tree line, it's just rock. It's like just
Yep.
a trail over rock, and the amount of flowers that were just growing in this rock was unbelievable.
Yeah.
There was a purple flower, and then there was this yellow flower, and I took a lot of pictures of them. I just couldn't believe it that these flowers are growing in this kind of rocky area. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's some of my favorite stuff is the flowers. I love the state flowers of Columbine. And I pretty much remember every year, like the Columbines that I see, because that kind of tells me, summer's here. And I love those flowers. And yeah, you get into some of these meadows and like the one we were at yesterday, it was just full of Indian paintbrushes and all these yellow flowers. And yeah, it's just gorgeous. And then, like you said, some of those you get in the higher elevations and they get lower and smaller, but they're really, really pretty. And
No.
you see so much kind of stuff. You're like, what is this? You know, it's just kind of bizarre. Some of the flowers and plant life that you see in those high elevations.
So, and this is just to the listeners that have never experienced, when you're getting into elevation in Colorado, you're going to experience mountain goats, I guess. The white,
yeah,
they're pretty chill, right?
yeah.
I've walked kind of by one and they were just like, yeah, what's up?
Yeah, they're cool. They say that they can also, like anything else, be a little unpredictable and whatever, but I've never had a problem with them. On Huron last week, yeah, he ended up coming up the trail that we were going down, and we kind of stepped off, but yeah, he was probably 15, 20 feet away.
No.
There's a video right now that's circulating. It's a white Subaru with kind of like a roof rack. I don't know if you've seen it, but these goats are up there just having the time of their lives up on top of it. Yeah. So
like smashing, like jumping up and down.
Yeah, jumping around on it. And the
oh no.
Some guy took a video of it, and the owner of the car, actually, I saw her in the comments, and she was a real good sport about it, because she's like, oh, I saw the hoof prints, I was wondering. And yeah, man, these two goats were just having the time of their lives running up and down all over this Subaru. But they were parked at Mount Blue Sky, I believe. Yeah. And and they're really cool. I always enjoy seeing goats.
Yeah. So what are some common misconceptions about hiking in Colorado that you want to debunk and let the Texas listeners know? And I'll start this, and I think I've already mentioned it earlier, it's almost like common sense, but when I hear people that visit Colorado, have never been to Colorado, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but all they talk about is bagging a 14er. And I really think they're doing themselves a disservice, because there's way more to the state of Colorado than bagging 14ers, like the alpine lakes, the wildlife, the,
wildflowers.
13,000. Yeah. I mean, so that's kind of like one thing that I always like try to not educate, but just offer suggestions that don't be
pigeonholed into
solely,
the 14s.
Yeah. And let me tell you what, to me also, like, and what we talked about earlier is just having that mindset that, I'm only going to do a 14er. I guarantee you, if you did a 12,000 foot peak or a 13,000 foot peak, I would bet my dollar you would have even more of a better experience, because you're going to have less people, less traffic. The parking's going to be better, So what about you?
Yeah, no, that's a really fair point. And then I would say be cautious of some of the influencer recommendations, because it's kind of the same idea. So, we have some incredible lakes too, that they're incredible, and the influencers really like to show them. But again, you're going to have all the crazy people. For example, like Hanging Lake is one that I see all the time. Was it cool? Was it pretty? Yeah, it was fine. But I'm thinking of an even better example. I ran across it here not too long ago, but it was this influencer Instagram page, and they're like, bucket list hike of Colorado. And I was like, man, that looks familiar. Well, it turned out to be this place called Devil's Backbone, and it's right down here in Loveland. I would be pissed if I went through and did all this preparation, got a hotel, did all this stuff, and went to this place, because is it pretty? Sure. But it's like a 1 or 2 mile walk. It's not even really a hike. And it's just one of those, I don't know. It just was really misleading, I guess, is what I'm getting at. So it's kind of important to filter out some of that. And then going back to Hanging Lake, I mean, again, it was pretty, but I mean, you get up there, there's boardwalks everywhere because it's so popular. You got to get a timed entry permit, which we can talk a little bit about that, because that's a huge component of Colorado nowadays. But yeah, it's a different experience for sure. And not as good as of what Colorado really offers.
All right, so to kind of go move on, what do you think are the biggest mistakes that you see new hikers or backpackers making when hiking in Colorado? And it maybe doesn't have to be just focused on non-locals, but just kind of what are some things that you see that you're like, oh yeah, that's a mistake.
Yeah, sometimes it's stuff as benign as entry permits. So like I'll talk a little bit about that now. Rocky Mountain National Park, you got to have a timed entry permit, especially for the Bear Lake corridor. Indian Peaks Wilderness, same kind of thing. Quandary, I don't know if you needed one when you did it, but you got to have a timed entry or parking pass.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those places now that are requiring that. So I mean that kind of sucks if you're all ramped up to go do something and last minute you find out that, oh, I need a parking pass or timed entry permit. Same thing even with one of the places in Indian Peaks. I just heard now that even the Winter Lot, which is a 3-mile hike into the main area, is now going to start requiring $10 for parking even in the wintertime. So that's one thing, but no, most of it is preparation.
Yeah.
Whether that's
stuff.
research or gear, having enough water, some of those things, or just not even knowing about the weather. Like you bringing up that point again, that's one of the most important ones I think is the weather, because you do not want to get trapped in lightning storm or wind. Wind's another big one that you really want to watch out for.
Okay. And I think, yeah, I don't know that I could disagree. The preparation and to the listeners, when you're researching these 14ers and stuff, expect to be overwhelmed because, you read this post and then read that post and, you don't really have an understanding of how early you need to get to these trailheads. And then, the first time you show up at 9 a.m, yeah, good luck with that. You're not, I mean, even with that Mohawk Lake one, we got there like at 6 a.m. And I think we were one of the first ones there, which is good. But yeah, I mean, at the end, once we had finished the hike and we're leaving, I mean, there was cars all the way down the road.
Mohawk Lakes
out,
is very popular too.
Yeah.
Which is for a good reason. I mean, it's beautiful in there, but yeah, there's tons of people. And I'm always kind of like wondering, because by the time I'm coming down at 10 or 11 o'clock and I see these people hiking up, I'm like, what are they doing? But,
do you ever stop them?
No. The only time I've ever dissuaded anybody from doing something is we were coming back down from Chasm Lake, which shares the same trail and trailhead as Long's Peak. And we were coming down and this guy had just got done blowing out a puff of recreational stuff.
Herbs.
Yeah, herbs. There you go. And he was like, hey, which one's Long's Peak? And I'm like, well, it's right there, He's like, okay. Do you think if we really hurry, we'll make it? And I was like, no, I don't think you'll make it. And please don't try. Cause at that point it's still, I don't even know how many miles and they're grossly unprepared. You could just tell, but no, I kind of just let people do their own thing. I mean, I haven't ever come into a scenario where it was like really, really bad, where I thought, okay, these people are in some extreme trouble or else I would probably say something. But usually if I see some storms rolling in and somebody's going up, even like on Huron last week, I'll try to kind of say something like, yeah, noticing the clouds are starting to build, and, just so that way they're kind of aware and thinking about it. But I try not to ever be somebody that's trying to be preachy or anything like that. So,
I think exactly kind of what you alluded to. I think we have a responsibility to our community, but also everybody's an adult, right? And yeah, I mean, I think we can't stop people from doing stuff, and usually it's probably going to make them want to do it even more. But certainly we can, make comments or have discussions.
Yeah,
I've
just
stopped
something maybe.
people.
Yep.
Yeah, I've stopped people going up Guadalupe Mountain, the peak, so the high point, and they're in flip flops. It's 90 degrees outside. Their girlfriend's crying, like,
Mhm.
and they're trying to tell her, no, let's go, and
Right.
the equipment and some of these things that
Yeah.
sometimes I'm a little more of a jerk than other times, but yeah, I try to just
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I definitely, I definitely have my times when I struggle to keep my mouth shut about certain things. That's, yeah. At the end of the day, I'm trying to, I kind of try to remind myself that, that they're out trying to, you know, enjoy whatever day they're having to, but if I can maybe, like I said, just mention something like that to make them maybe think, then that's kind of where I leave it.
yeah.
But like I said, thankfully I haven't really come into too many scenarios where I felt like a real need. I've dissuaded people, like even on here on last week, there was a guy making some comments basically about harassing the goats, and I kind of struggled with keeping my mouth shut on that one. But just stuff like that, and again, that's something that you're going to find more on some of those more popular
Yeah.
areas. So it just comes with people. So
Yeah, and in these types of things with feeding the animals, harassing the animals, all they're doing is setting that animal up to be exterminated. It
right.
becomes a nuisance.
Yeah, and luckily, like in this case with this guy, he wasn't actually doing anything. He was just kind of running his mouth as though he was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I yeah, I would have a really really tough time if somebody was actually doing something like people that carve their initials into trees and all that stuff.
Oh, don't even
I
get me started.
yeah, I would not be able to keep my mouth shut on some of that,
Yeah.
or if somebody was hurt. And and there's sometimes I always joke about it, like people picking wildflowers, like do not pick the wildflowers, please. And a big element of that though too is education. I understand that somebody that may not be familiar or that experienced with the mountains may just not realize that it's not okay to
Yeah.
do that. Just like feeding squirrels and stuff, they may not realize that the impact that actually has, they don't realize that they're doing harm. And so, there's that component of it too, where I know that some people just don't know any better, and when I see somebody doing something kind of stupid, like picking wildflowers, I try to be somewhat nice about it and assume that they just don't know.
You're
But
like, are you from Texas?
yeah, where you come from? No,
Yeah.
and again, I've seen plenty of people from
Yeah.
Colorado doing stupid crap. But
Yeah.
yeah, at the end of the day, the leave no trace. I'm sure you guys probably preach that pretty hard down there as well. It's the same thing
Yeah.
up here, So
Yeah. And it's funny. We haven't talked about it. The most fierce animal on the trails and that I've discovered in Washington and Colorado and New Mexico are them damn chipmunks
oh yeah,
that are used to being fed. And you get on a
uh huh,
peak or you're climbing up, them suckers will come at you to take your
yeah,
food.
yeah, yeah.
There
They'll
is
run right
no
across you.
yeah, there is no shame in their game. They will tear
Mm-mm.
you up to get that Cliff Bar.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They know your food source. One part of that, I believe, that they've talked in the past that the goats when they get and I and this was long enough ago. I don't know how the validity of it, but I'd heard that some of the park rangers were having to, you know, again, I don't know how true it is, but like tase or whatever, some of the goats up around some of the like Mount Blue Sky, which used to be called Mount Evans, um, because they were so used to people feeding them and whatever, and they were having a lot of negative encounters
Yeah.
between them. So, yeah, I mean, you start conditioning these animals to, whether it's a bear or goats or your dreaded chipmunks, um,
Yep.
they just see you as a food source. So,
Yeah, and guess what? When that bear comes at you for some food, and then he reacts to whatever you do, then the bear's going to get put down, not you.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know?
exactly. Yeah.
So
And
that's
that's the heartbreaking side of it is, yeah, the animals are always the one that pay. So,
you know. All right. So now I would like to kind of take this into like start talking about some safety and preparation of really just to give some ideas to our listeners that are going to be or could be or planning to travel and hike up in Colorado. So let's just talk about day hiking. I would suspect that you and I will have common items, right? We have the backpack. Probably we have a buff. We have the InReach satellite device. We have first aid kit. Like there's just no matter where we're hiking, there's just some
yep.
commonality of these items. What do you think are some essential items that are really specific to, I don't know, Colorado, New Mexico, where there's chances that there's snow and stuff like that?
So, some of the stuff that I'll have in my pack, especially in the wintertime, is even just like hand and feet warmers. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but something that I'll have pretty much through the whole year, because even on some of these higher peaks in the middle of summer, they're still getting into the high 30s or 40s, at
Yeah.
night. But an emergency bivy is one of the most important things. Um,
Oh, okay.
for anybody that's not real familiar, it's basically just like a space blanket, but more of like a sleeping bag, something that you can pop out and get into, seal yourself up. And it's not going to be a comfortable night's sleep, but if you get stranded up on something, it's going to really, really increase your chances of surviving the night.
Yeah.
Um, and then a good shell, like a shell jacket. I'll tell you what, if you can cut down wind or the little bit of moisture that you might encounter, it's it's huge. I have this one of the first things that I bought years ago. I was at Sierra Trading Post. Is this little Under Armour black shell, little hooded shell, and I can't think of a single trip that I've had where I did not have that thing with me. And I start getting a little chilly. I throw that on, cuts that wind out, and it is far more comfortable. It's light enough and breathes though, so when you are warm, it's not you know really making you sweat too bad. You can zip it down. It helps. But a good shell is, I think, one of the things that a person should really, really have with them at all times.
And I think you're 100% correct with that. And also understand what a shell is used for, hard
Right.
shell, soft shell, when you would want to use it, what you would want to use it with to accompany it, like to understand and not just have one, but understand what its purpose is. And like you said earlier, like you go test out the equipment. So
Yep.
you take your shell out. Okay, it's a little drizzly or it's way windy. Let me try this piece of gear and see what the impact is, positively or negatively.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, that's a perfect example. It's because even with that shell, I've done that where I went out on a day that, again, it was something close where, okay, yeah, there's no real danger to this, but I want to see how this thing does in these drizzly conditions. I want to see how
Yeah.
warm I stay or not, and yeah, layers, layers, layers when it comes to whether it be in the wintertime or even again like yesterday up on that summit, it was chilly, and
Yeah.
having layers is so important because you can kind of fine tune how warm or how cool you are. And because in the wintertime, you don't want to have this big heavy coat on because now you're going to be sweating. Well, then you sweat. That's not good at all. The last thing you want to be
Yeah.
doing is really is sweating in the wintertime.
Yep.
Um, so being able to fine tune that. So for example, like my wintertime stuff, I usually wear like a merino wool or whatever base layer, um, and then some sort of either long or short sleeve, kind of like the synthetic shirt. You know,
Yeah.
anybody I'm sure probably by now listening to this knows that cotton is no good. You don't want anything to do with cotton. And but then I'll have a puffy or some sort of mid layer, and then a shell that'll go over all that, and all of that's usually good for as cold as I want to get, 15 below or better, 20 below.
Yeah.
And then much out of that, I'm not going. I'm staying home.
Yeah, and and I think sometimes people think that layering is to keep you warm, but it's to keep you from sweating. It's to keep you at that perfect internal temperature where you don't start sweating. Yeah, okay, you might sweat a little bit, but it's you unzip, you pull off, like to layering, there's more than just the garments themselves. Is can you unbutton, can you unzip, and before you take
it's a
off.
versatility.
Yeah.
And one of the popular sayings that I've heard is they'll say, "Be bold, go cold." Like when you're starting off in the morning.
That's my tried and true.
And sometimes it's tough. I tell you what, when it's dark and the wind's blowing and it's chilly out there, the first thing you're wanting to do is throw on all your layers. But if you can do it, obviously you don't want to, not have anything on. But if you can do it where you're starting off on the lighter side, the chances are within the first 15, 20 minutes, especially once you start pulling a little bit of vertical climbing, you're going to be warm. So it's really important.
It's not chances. You will be stopping in about 10 minutes and taking the outer layers off.
Well, and the problem with it is, Jason, is a lot of times, if you're anything like me, I hate stopping. I don't know why. I don't really have a good reason. And I've seen that in a lot of my friends where they just don't like stopping. So now all of a sudden you are, getting too hot, and you're just trying to go, and you don't really want to stop. And so it's better to err on that light side, and then that way you don't even have to get to it. But otherwise, 10 minutes in, you're pulling off layers, and you're like, well, that couple minutes of discomfort, you would have been better off.
If there's nothing that you learn, listeners, on this podcast, it's that be bold, start cold.
Yep.
We do that here in Guaj. You start hiking in the 3-4 in the morning. It's 19 degrees, 23 degrees, and to get out of the sleeping bag and start to prepare sucks. But when we start hiking, it's what you can bear, because you're going to be in a few minutes. You're going to be warm, and stopping. It's like at my age, if I'm doing a big day, stopping and then trying to hike again, like my whole body's like
you kind of lose momentum. There's an aspect of momentum that you kind of lose in that.
I don't mind stopping for a second because I take a ton of pictures.
Same.
But like stopping, taking off your backpack, putting on this, that's too long.
Same thing with microspikes or snowshoes or all that, because there's times when we'll be on stuff that's it's slick enough where it's like, microspikes would probably help, but you're just like, it's okay, and you'll go and go and go.
It's in the bottom of my backpack. I'm not.
And finally it'll get it to being a pain enough where you're like, okay, let's put them on, and then you put them on, you're like, man, this is nice, and you're like, but there's something. Especially going out, it seems like that sometimes it's kind of hard to stop. So, but I was gonna mention that with like the water thing, because I'm sure sooner or later we're going to talk about that. Is listening to your previous episodes, we've kind of gone back and forth, because I've always been kind of this water bladder fan, and
I will stab your water bladder.
I know, but
and watch you flipping around like a dead fish on the ground while you have no water.
Even from distance, you're getting me turned over to the water bottles, for the smart water bottles, because a lot of times I'll have those. So for the listeners, I like the I know I'm going to get them this week. Actually, I'm going to buy one. I'm going to buy the Trucker Joe's water bottle holder this week.
You have to. I was about to say, if you don't have one already, I was going to send you one.
No, I'm gonna jump online, because I got a buddy I think I'm gonna buy one for as well. But no, I've always liked the bladder just because of the convenience, and being in Colorado, one benefit that we have here that I'm sure you guys are a lot more limited on is water resources. I mean, we'll pass so many streams and ponds or lakes on a typical day that it's. I always have a life straw as an emergency, so it's not really the concerns, but after talking to you here a while back about your hatred for the bladders and how I use them, I was thinking of being cracking up because a couple weeks ago I did a trip and I set my dang pack on the mouthpiece and not knowing it on the drive. So we get to the trailhead and I pull out my pack and I'm like, oh, what's all wet? And I mean, I'm the dummy that didn't lock it. It's got the locking mouthpiece, but I didn't lock it, and here I am. 2/3 of my water's leaked out in the back of my friend's car. I know, and I was like, dang it, Jason, you put a hex on me. So
hey, it happens.
Yeah, but I think I'm gonna kind of go. I think I'm gonna go kind of a hybrid because I've always done the bladder, and then so for like yesterday, a little bit longer day, I'll usually have at least 1 liter a bottle as a reserve, though, because I've always been aware of the concerns with the bladders. Because if you do get a hole or whatever, and then like yesterday, I brought an extra 2 liter, or I'm sorry, not 2 liter, but one of the smart waters, the 1 liters. I froze and I actually stashed it along the trail. So I didn't have to worry about it. But I think I'm going to go to where if I do have the bladder in, it'll probably have like maybe 1 liter in there, but then I'm going to switch predominantly to those bottles. Cause one of the things that I've noticed this year, now that I've been thinking about it more, is just like you mentioned, not knowing how much is in the bladder. Cause it's been several times where all of a sudden you're going along and then it's empty, and I'm like, okay, luckily I always have that reserve, but still.
Yeah. And like, if I'm with a group, I want to see, I don't care if you're more experienced than I, or I'm more experienced. I want to see how much water you have.
Right.
Because then I stop drinking or start to plan that, okay, if you run out, I'll have some for you or anybody in my party. And I just don't get me going on water bladders. We'll have another hour.
Well, and kind of going like what you're saying with that is, or like with the stopping, that was kind of one of my reasons for not liking just having bottles before, was I didn't like stopping. But like you said, with that water bottle holder, it's going to be perfect. Yeah. To
game
have that
changer. So. And also when you have 2 liters here, you don't have it in your hip belt. And, right. Or let's say you have 4 liters. So 2 here, 2 in the hip belts. The weight of your backpack is night and day.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. That distribution
how more comfortable. Yes. Yeah. Please order one. If not, I'm going to send you one. So
no, I'm definitely gonna get on the train with it. So yeah, that'll be nice to have. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say that when you guys hike, you probably don't worry too much about water carries, and that's something that's very important to us because of the heat and the lack of just natural streams and stuff. That so I like at the Guads, there's no water, so we're carrying 8 liters, 7 liters on an overnight. So yeah, it's always a concern, and I can't have all my water in a single reservoir. If something happens, then I'm really screwed.
Right. No, that does make sense. And like I said, even just from a convenience standpoint, some of the points that you've made of monitoring or whatever has made a lot of sense. And I have a close friend. I need to ask her the details of it, but she actually just got really sick not too long ago. I don't know what the scenario was, but yeah, she drank water from a stream or something. And I don't know if they used, the iodine. I know there's the sterile pens or the filters. I'm not sure. I would like to talk to her and figure out kind of what happened with that. But yeah, she got really sick, and for 2 or 3 weeks, she had to battle something. So, but then wintertime, touching on that too, there's a lot of cons with the with the water bladder in wintertime, obviously, because that line freezes up. It's happened to me a few times, and they got the sleeves that help a little bit, but it doesn't really help. A lot of times what I'll do is I end up just kind of tucking it down in my jacket, or blowing air back into my bladder after I take a drink will help it. But still, I mean, that mouthpiece freezes fairly easily and quickly. And I mean, that's a concern too when you're out in the cold.
So what you're saying is, or what I'm hearing is that you've learned some valuable information on the Trailblazing Texas podcast.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah. No. So yeah. No. It's been good. It's been good. Kind of thinking about some of those others, because we kind of spoiled in the sense. Again, we don't have to worry about it like you do there. But the more I think about it, it's like, yeah, I could see some of that stuff being pretty valuable.
So the next question, I think, really, and what was kind of crazy is that you even say that this impacts locals, is just how to manage and deal with altitude sickness. And like, what are some of the signs that we should look for? And then when you start to recognize it, what should the actions be?
Yes. So again, with some of my experience, I've ran across people that, they'll start kind of getting almost like they're having a hard time staying awake was one of them. But headache is obviously really common, and then vomiting. So once you start getting really into that, it's time to come down, in my opinion. Like if I'm going up with somebody and they're really struggling with something like that, like, I mean, if you just got like a mild headache or whatever, and it's not really progressing, then, I wouldn't be overly concerned. But yeah, if all of a sudden, as you're climbing up, they're noticeably getting worse, or the headache or nausea. Yeah. It's just, there's not a single mountain on this planet that's worth the, risking all that. So I would come down right away in a scenario like that. But you can kind of set yourself up, especially if you're traveling from sea level. Do what you can to maybe just kind of dabble into something a little lower, something, get up into the 10 or 11,000 feet and just kind of see how you feel. Kind of a funny story. One of the earlier 14ers I did, wintertime, it was just one of the ones that they consider easy. None of them I don't think are easy, but you know what I mean? They, good access. You can do it in the wintertime. But it was a guy that I'd met up with on Facebook, and I never actually met him in person before, but he kind of knew more about the area or whatever. And I was like, I'll join this guy. And then another guy off Facebook decided to join. Well, it wasn't until we had set out that we realized that the third guy that decided to join was from, where was he from? It was something like Ohio or something or Kentucky. That's where he's from, is Kentucky. And he's like, yeah, I flew in last night. And me and the other guy that was from Colorado, we're kind of looking at each other like, well, but he did great. He actually ended up getting to the top before us. But, that's kind of more of the rarity, and he had done a handful of high peaks before, so he knew how he was going to feel and all that. But if you're coming in, try to give yourself at least a few days if you can. I would just dissuade people from doing that, where you fly in, and then the next day you're trying to hike, because, you're already at a much higher altitude than you're used to, just even coming into Denver at, 5,000 or 6,000 feet. And then all of a sudden you're driving up another, 4 or 5 to 10 or 11. And then now you're expecting your body to go another 3,000 plus vertical to the summit. And it just doesn't give you time to really acclimate at all. So.
Yeah, I think that's key. And that's what we usually do. Well, there's 2 points to this. Is if this is your first time in Colorado and you're hiking, give yourself, 3 or 4 days before you do your main hike. And within those 2 or 3 days, like we go walk Breckenridge, the town, it's pretty town, but we're putting in some miles. we go do a local little hike that's a couple miles just to get out and moving.
Water's a pretty important one too.
Yes.
Staying
Stay
hydrated.
hydrated. Yeah.
Yep.
And even when you're not thirsty, just drink some water.
Yeah. Yeah. And like a buddy of mine who's very experienced, I've seen him correct people on that, because people will be like, just drink water, drink. And yeah, you do. You also don't want to go overboard to where you're just, waterlogging yourself either. But
Yeah.
how I prepare is I just try to make sure that I drink like a good amount the day before, kind of like what you would at a normal time of. So for me, like 100 ounces, that's basically 110 ounces of what you're supposed to be doing normally. So try to get that in. And I think that helps a lot with just feeling better.
So it's just not drinking. Like sometimes you don't drink any water, right? I mean, not you or me, but like just in general, yeah.
Well,
also,
or alcohol.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. I have friends again that they enjoy a Summit beer, and that's fine. But those are people also that are very familiar with the elevation and very used to it and all that. But I've also seen people where.
And that wraps up another exciting episode of the Trailblazing Texas podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode today, and stay tuned for our next episode, where we will pick back up where we left off and guarantee to uncover many more hiking gems and share many more tips to enhance your experience on the trail. Until then, happy trails and happy hiking.